Good day, everybody. Welcome to a next episode of Let's Talk Trade. And we have Taju back with us today. Taju, welcome. Where are you located today?
Well, I'm currently in Maryland in the U.S.
Oh,
Yeah,
early.
yeah, that's why. Actually,
Hope you have your coffee. I have my very good Italian coffee to keep me awake, and you
oh,
need one to wake you
yeah,
up, I think.
yeah. I was just getting up from bed.
Awesome, awesome. So,
Yeah,
I Taju, welcome. I think last time we left off and we shared that consultation is exceptionally important, that private and public sector consultations is practical and it can actually bring benefit. And we kind of, spoiler alert, told the market that we actually did that together with a big multinational telecommunications service provider that was seeking to export their equipment. I think it was up to 11 million US dollars that was trapped in the country. It was not waste, but it was defective units that could have
that's
become
correct.
a
Yeah,
waste if left
that's correct.
untouched. And
Yeah,
we basically, at the time, back in the day, I think it was 2018, um, the law prohibited export of previously imported equipment. And these equipment were imported by distributors, sold to customers, and this a multinational had a service support program where these units, in the event that they become defective, will be swapped out with a replacement part to keep the circular economy from working, and so to ensure that the customer has a network working at all times. So the thing is, these defective returns was building up in the country, causing a defective stock in a warehouse for over 11 million over a period of 7 to 8 years. And when the customer approached us and said, can we export these equipment out of the country? They actually alluded to that a lot of local service providers, consultants, consulting agencies actually advised them that they can export the goods out of the market under a provision of repair and return and just never return, which would be incorrect. And so when they reached out to us, they said, is it possible to do this compliantly? When we looked at the law, we saw, okay, the law says the export of previously imported goods is prohibited. So, in fact, it was not possible to export it. But there was another provision that said that in the event that a clause in the articles is not suiting your business needs, you can ask the Minister of Finance to ask the President to issue a waiver on such clause, and the President will review the case. And that's exactly what you and I did.
yeah.
and the broader Blue Blocks team. And in the end, we got that waiver. Yes, it took time. Yes, we had to follow procedures that didn't exist at the time. And yes, we had to help the ministry to design procedures so that they can actually do this law. But nonetheless, after the period of doing that, the president did sign that waiver. And even more so, after that was issued and the goods were exported, the minister actually reached out to us and said, but how many companies, what industry is this impacting? And now, today, that law is changed to have previously imported goods under the telecommunication sector are allowed to be exported with a 2.5% surcharge. I
That's
mean,
correct.
sorry, till today, it blows my mind. Because it's so cool that we did this. And I think it only took us a year and a half. I think something like that, a year and 9 months or something like that to push that
About
through.
that. Yeah,
And I think this really comes to the heart that normal human beings like me and you, we're nobody special. I studied engineering, you studied law, you worked in customs, and you know, I worked in different companies. We don't know the president. We don't know the Minister of Finance, but through following the law, we were able to take one step after the next and change a law.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's right.
Taju, please tell us the story. I mean, how did you feel the day when I brought this case onto you, especially because you said, I want to do something similar like what you did in Ghana. I want to do in Nigeria. When this case came, how did you feel?
Yeah, I was, I had a fantastic feeling because this was an environment that was very difficult to get things done, especially when there's an existing law that's that prohibits an action, and is only at the level of the presidency that can be done. And in such an environment, it becomes difficult when you have to when your case is taken up to the presidency, because the presidency that's a bigger layer than the ministry. So at that point, even communication, because at the ministry level, we were able to communicate with the officials, with our documents. So the presidency was like an appeal, or maybe what you call the Supreme Court in law, where they just deal with the documents. You might not even be able to have access to make any explanation. So the document was sent forward, but we were not getting. If you remember, there was no response.
Yeah.
4 to 6 weeks, and we asked the question, what do we need to do? I was back at the ministry that, look, is there any additional document that's required? And the ministry said, no, we have sent everything there, but we cannot push the presidency to take an action. So we thought about what to do, because we could not just continue folding our arms. Then we decided that there's a need to write another letter to remind the minister that an action has been taken, everything has been done by blue blocks. Is there any other thing? Because we're not getting response, especially with the law that if you make an application for something, there's a law in Nigeria which is still applicable, but the implementation, is an issue. But there's a law that when you make an application and after 2 weeks, if you don't get response from the authority, you can assume that what you're asking for has been approved.
That's a nice
which came through what was called executive, order 1. Then, but it's not implementable, because after 2 weeks, if you don't get the approval, if you don't get the letter, you cannot do anything, because the next authority will ask you, where is the approval? And you're going to tell them that there's a law that says that by default, anything that you want to do, you can continue, So it was very, very difficult. Then that decision that we should remind the minister again through a letter worked. The minister saw that and pushed that to the presidency. And the presidency had to take action, and because we did not go through any side door, or maybe focusing on knowing somebody in the presidency. It was our document that spoke for us, that acted for us, and the authority at the presidency also saw that, yes, this application was genuine and there was nothing else that they needed to do, and therefore action was taken. I mean, by the time that came out, I fell on top, and
conqueror of the world.
And the encouragement by blue blocks too, that Taju, we're not ready to, we're ready to give you more documents. If they're asking for documents, we're ready to do more research and do whatever they want to do. But then they never told us to do any additional thing. Everything that we needed to do had been done. and then it came out, which shows that, even in a very difficult environment, that all that was required, that knowing the law and be consistent with your line of presentation, and eventually, things will be done. And I mean, to add this, officials too also get confused when they see a company making an application and the company is inducing them. There's another problem which happens in developing economies, from the private sector. The private sector may believe that, look, I can't get anything done except I know people or except I induce them. But if you are consistent on your position that you are taking this action not because you know somebody, you are taking this action not because you're ready to induce anybody, the authority too will sit back and look at it that, yes, this is a company that knows the law and is helping our case by ensuring that they meet up with the requirement of the law.
Absolutely, and I think almost on that point, right? I would like to give credit. Unfortunately, we can't disclose the name of the company that was standing, the multinational, organization that really believed in this. But I want to give credit to them because I really think, they stood behind this and they were not. Open to shenanigans, to malpractices. And that was really great to have a partner that understood the values of Blue Blocks, understood the values of what we stand for, and, followed our lead. But we're willing to be patient. We're willing to agree to a course of action which is supported by the law, and understanding that that's what it takes to get a ruling that is completely changing the landscape of the entire sector. I think I take my hat off for such a brand that stands for what is right and stands for what is possible. Because I think when we started, the only thing they had to go on is other consultants telling them this is not possible, you have to do something wrong, or us telling them you have to ask the president. And I think what I respect about this brand so much is that they were willing to say, okay, we're not willing to do what is the other ways of doing what is wrong. We want to do the right way, and we don't know how to do it, and we are going to trust you to guide us that way. And I take my hat off for them for trusting us with their case, for believing in us, for supporting us through this case, and providing us the documentation as we help them to say, we need this, we're going to need this, we're going to write this defense for you, and to you really understand from their side, this is the arguments to put down. And I think a shout out just for them, because I do think we need more multinational companies that's willing to stand up in this way if we want to see change in the law that is practical for them, ultimately for the industry and for the market. We need more big multinationals like that to stand up for what is right.
Yes, that's correct, Dorothy. I mean, because time could be of the essence. Maybe a multinational company can get to be impatient and get to initiate what is not supposed to be the case. But this company worked along with Blue Blocks.
Yes.
After Blue Blocks has laid down the facts that yes, we will get there, but we need to take one step after the other without having to take a rush.
Exactly.
So it's commendable that a company like that, who understand, be patient, and if more multinational companies will do that, ready to be patient and go through the system of law, I think we will have a practice that is sustainable in terms of compliance on both the private and public sector. And like you said, the law was changed eventually. And even right now, the bureaucracy, you know, is limited to the level of the ministry.
Yes,
The
that was
documentation does
the
not have to
best,
go to
right?
the president anymore.
Yes.
So because I think at the point they found out that look, the ministry has taken every action that was required to be taken, but there was a delay at the presidency.
Exactly.
And it was also good for the system that the system realized that there was a need to facilitate compliance documentation, and the delay at the presidency was not necessary. And the law was changed that it now gave more powers to the Minister of Finance. That
Exactly.
once there is a compliant uh, request, then the minister can approve. And to make things easier also, they put a tariff though, if you remember, they put a tariff,
Yes.
2.5% to ensure that it is only the genuine exporters that will be able to make an application, for that. And
Exactly.
so the government is able to make its own revenue, while at the same time, the private sector too, that is committed and serious about that transaction, is able to do that within a reasonable time.
Absolutely. And I think that's the beauty for me of this, right? Because if you can remember when we started with this, we went and we looked at the case and we looked the case at merit. And first we just reviewed it together with a client and we said, listen, this is the articles we will be executing in the law. And this is the documentation we propose to take to the ministry. And we put together, because they wanted to export all of this goods. So we analyzed all of their goods, what they want to, we analyzed all of the HS codes, we analyzed the value of the goods, and we put together a package of prepared documentation, which included the value of the goods, the reason the business model needs to export these goods, the rationale behind the Basel Convention, as well as the entire international law and local law, and what the rationale is behind this request, and what facility in the law allows them for them as well to be protected, right? We put all of that together before we even approached the government. So we didn't go there and say, oh, Mr. Government, how do I do this? No, we studied the case. We prepared all of our documents. We prepared the case. And then we went to the head of customs first and foremost to double check, what do they think about this? If we would go to the minister, would they support the operational execution in the event of a positive ruling? Once we got their buy-in, we went to the minister and said, okay, now we're here to present our case. And can you rememmer that the minister told us, we don't have a procedure for this?
Thank you, Dorothy, for taking me back, and that is the importance of getting to understand the procedure, the step by step. We acknowledge that the customs will implement. So we did not undermine the authority of the customs. The first thing we did was to approach the customs that look, what are the procedures, what are the provisions that will enable easy implementation by customs, and custom advised that yes, if we do this and do that, but we will direct you to the Ministry of Finance, because the approval will come from that side and we will implement. So already we secured information from customs about implementation. I now went to the ministry and they will push our documents, at a point that we saw the obstacle, because we did more research and knew the law and we had to present this to them, that helped the case. So the important thing there that we need to see is that there's a need for a company that is representing the clients in import and export to really have a clear understanding of what the rules are, because the public sector can confront the company that, look, this is not what is applicable. We need additional information. That additional information may not be necessary because maybe everything that is required has been provided. So if you're making an application and you're not too sure of what and what you have provided, you may not really be able to get through. It's easy to discuss this issue, Dorothy, but the process, when I think about it again.
Exactly. I mean, I remember the day we went there, and he said to us, we said, we want this clause which says we should ask you to ask the president. And he said to us, there's no law. I don't know what the process is. And you said to him, but this other law says you have to have a process, and your process has to be published. So where is the law? Where is the process? Remember?
Yeah.
And it was so beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's something really good about the provisions of the WTO TFA. It covers everything. Because this has to do with Article 1, publication of law.
Yes.
Which requires the authority to publish. So if you're expecting compliance by the private sector and the law is not published, then it might not be taken to be the law. I mean, you can't bring surprises, And we applied that provision. We said, okay, this is you're telling us. Where is it published? I mean, because we were ready to obey, to go step by step, So, I think even where we see that developing economies have issues with implementation, persistent action by the private sector related to compliance, can help to improve, the business environment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think what was so beautiful as well there is when the minister realized, that there isn't a process, and you were so kind, and he was so kind, that you guys could talk on a professional level with one another to say, you know what, he was open and said to you, I don't have a process. And you said, but you should have a process. And I remember the day when we sat together, and, you wrote down and said, okay, what could the process be if there is no process for this? And we helped him to write down 6 steps that could be his process, right? Okay. So step 1, check the documentation and review the documentation together. Step 2, assess if any additional documentation is required and provide feedback. Collect all documentation for review and the case. Then prepare an internal document for representation or the decision on whether you want to proceed with the case or not. Yes. And then have a case file that you prepare, send it to the president for decision, and then have the process come back, and either with a yes or a no, or then a potential appeal. And the moment we wrote that down for him, it's such a generic process, but it was something he didn't have before, right? And suddenly he had a process which not only, well, first and foremost, wasn't there before, but secondly would be neutral. It was just steps that would protect him, that would protect our client, that would protect the president, that would make sure that all parties can continue to stay in consultation with one another until the situation is resolved. And I think that was for me a beautiful moment where public-private consultation became real. That even if an authority doesn't have something, that doesn't mean we need to blame the authority and say, oh, they are again not having that, or oh, they're again incompetent, or something nonsense. They're as well on their development, and they're developing these things. And because the reason that clause didn't have a process is because nobody used it.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely.
And if nobody uses these articles, why would they develop any articles or any processes for it? If more people use it, they'll develop the processes.
Yes, really, and one other thing, which I was excited about was, like, at a point that we would there was a delay about the approval coming up from the presidency when it was like over 6 weeks, and the ministry said, look, they could not do anything at that level, and they cannot even put pressure on the presidency. We initiated the private sector. We initiated Blue Blocks initiated that. Look, okay, if you cannot take any action, you can go in there. We're not asking you to do that, but we initiated that. We want to write a letter as a reminder to the presidency that we have applied through the Ministry of Finance, and our letter is, our case is there, and we are reminding the presidency to take necessary action. But this letter had to pass through the minister. Exactly. We told them at the ministry, and this said, well, you can do that. So there was an initiative that nobody, advised us to do that. It was not the public sector. So it's still very important that the private sector should have initiative. What next step?
Exactly.
When you are getting the process on and you get stuck, and you know that you are following the rules and regulations and compliance, you should be able to think out of the box.
Yes.
What is the next step that is legitimate? It was legitimate for us to write just a letter without blaming anybody. Yes. It just said a reminder.
Exactly.
And that letter was the magic, a reminder. and the ministry just presented that letter to the authority, the presidency. Yes, this letter was not initiated by the ministry, but the applicants.
Exactly.
So really.
And I think that the point that you're making there is so valid, because you're thinking out of the box, thinking legitimately out of the box, thinking justifiably out of the box, thinking defense mechanisms out of the box, meaning don't just come and blame and say, oh, okay, you cannot do it, you need to do it, it's your job. What can you do as the private sector? What can you do in order to use the law as a tool to move forward? And how can you stay diplomatic in a practical situation? How can you stay respectful? And one of the things that I love the most, how can you stay compassionate? I think compassionate compliance is one of the best ways, because you come with your rights in a compassionate way to write that letter, not blaming anybody, and say, the law says this is my right, and I'm asking you in your authority to apply the law and give me my right. And it's such a beautiful way to protect all parties, because in that instance, the human nature of people come to play, which is, I want to do what's right. I want to do what's in the best of people. And I think that's when we see human nature at the highest order, is when we're calm, when we're compassionate, when we, present and ask for our rights to be implemented in a just way. And I think that's just beautiful.
Yeah.
I think, Taju, thank you again for joining us today and sharing this beautiful story that unfolded. I think I can just ask so many more private sector companies to not back down in especially the ECOWAS region, in Nigeria, in this area, across the entire Africa, but specifically, don't back down. The authorities are ready. They are trained, and they want to facilitate. They want to engage. And I just really want to encourage the private sector to stand up, to test these processes, to move forward, because they may just change the law completely.
Yes, really, absolutely, Dorothy. Especially with the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, and talking about intra-African trade.
Yeah.
Already, the economic regions which is like, the Economic Community of West African State, ECOWAS, and the East African Economic Community and the Southern African Community. There are issues there already within the countries. Then now we're talking about African continental trade. Different countries have their laws, and there's an attempt to harmonize these laws in order to allow for continental trade. It's going to be really difficult. It's not as easy as, it's been put across that after which African continental free trade, has come, the traders are going to face obstacles,
Yes.
in navigating, transactions from one country to another,
Yes.
especially if the laws are not properly harmonized. Even when they're harmonized, interpretation can be an issue. And that is why the private sector must build capacity. For me, I think the sources of the intra-African trade lies more in the hands of the private sector,
I agree
not
with
even
that
the public
wholeheartedly.
sector. Because there has to be a very strong private sector that understands the rules and regulations, and how to engage the public sector, to be able to get through the existing obstacles, non-tariff barriers that are
Yeah.
going to be very difficult to remove.
Yes.
So this is the time,
Yes.
that such companies have to be in existence for us to even talk about a successful implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. Otherwise, the public sector will use it as a one point, non-compliance.
Exactly.
And when they just use the word non-compliance, then the private sector that is intimidated will go back and try to do things informally.
Yeah.
And that is not what
It's not necessary.
that is not what the intra-African trade ought to be. So there's a lot of challenge which must be driven, which must be handled by the private sector.
Correct. Absolutely.
And companies like Book Blocks, have a foundation already, which could be built up as rapidly as possible and be able to champion,
Yes.
the private sector, enabling, intra-African trade.
Fully agree with you. Preach it, brother.
Thank you very much, Dorothy, for this opportunity. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Taju, for joining us today. I greatly appreciate, and I look forward to a next discussion on Let's Talk Trade. Thank you for everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for everybody out there for joining us today on Let's Talk Trade, and let's talk trade soon. Wish you a great day. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.